Good evening and welcome to this exciting first program of 2021. I am Saida Basora, Executive Director of AIA Dallas and the Architecture and Design Foundation. Thank you, David and Preservation Dallas, for co-hosting this panel conversation tonight. And thank you to Fair Park First for bringing us this opportunity for discussion and feedback. As you know, AIA Dallas and the Foundation love to celebrate Fair Park. We currently host, as part of our Architecture and Design Exchange programming, a Fair Park Tram tour produced in partnership with Fair Park First and led by Norm Alston, FAIA, who's right there waving at you. This is a monthly open-air tram tour, and our next tour will be at noon on Wednesday, January 20th. We're limiting group sizes to accommodate social distancing, so register early, and to reserve your seat, you can please go to dallasaddicts.org, and I'm sure Katie will post that in the chat. All right, now, so about our program tonight. Fair Park, as we all know, is the crown jewel of Dallas history, and this proposed master plan is the awaited promise to redevelop the park while protecting its history in a manner that will drive economic development and take Fair Park into the future as a beautiful park, a vibrant and diverse cultural center, and as a supportive and engaged neighbor. There are many of us excited about the program tonight. We have over 340 people registered to be part of this conversation with you all. So before we begin, I would like to mention a few housekeeping notes. This is a Zoom webinar, like you all can see. So please post all questions that you have for the panel on the Q&A feature, not on the chat. The chat goes very quickly, and you can use the chat to visit and post comments and say hello to everybody, and for sidebar conversations, but make sure that questions to be answered by the panel are posted on the Q&A. It's the best way for Darren to keep track of everything. Tonight we have three inspiring panelists, Norman Alston, Brian Llewellyn, and Darren James. Norm Alston, FAIA, is one of 4 founding board members of Fair Park First. He's primarily responsible for facilities and historic preservation issues, and has been especially involved in the development of this new master plan update. Norm has devoted most of his 40-year career as an architect to the protection, preservation, and promotion of our state's rich architectural and cultural heritage. As a young architect, his first historic restoration was a small building at Fair Park. It was known as the Portland Cement Association Model Home of the Future. Since that modest start, his restoration projects have spanned across his beloved Texas. With his involvement in Fair Park First, he says he has come home to where it all started for him, to help with the revitalization of Fair Park. In 2019, Norm was inducted into the American Institute of Architects College of Fellows. He's also a board member of Preservation Dallas, an executive trustee of the Texas Architects Committee, and he's currently an ex officio member at the board on the board of AIA Dallas. So welcome, Norm.
Great here.
Brian Llewellyn is the executive director of Fair Park First. He has more than 20 years of experience in destination tourism and experiential events. His career has been dedicated to developing and delivering impactful experiences for employees and guests, relaunching attractions, and growing public-private partnerships. Past projects have included Stone Mountain Park in Atlanta, Georgia, the historic Queen Mary in Long Beach, California, and the Whitney Museum in San Antonio, Texas. Brian's work transforming concepts into reality has been featured in Time Magazine, the Wall Street Journal, and numerous other national media outlets. He holds degrees in education and pre-law from Georgia State University and enjoys living in Dallas with his wife, Tina. Hi, Brian. And then we have Daryl James, FAIA, who's another founding board member of Fair Park First and leads the organization as president. He's the president of KI Enterprises, a middle market design and construction services firm, where he's responsible for the growth strategy and implementation for all business units. Darren uses his passion for transforming communities through design, mentoring, leadership, and civic engagement to serve underserved areas. In early 2019, he also was inducted into the American Institute of Architects College of Fellows. And throughout his career, Darren has been recognized by organizations like the Greater Dallas Planning Council and Dallas Business Journal. Darren's commitment to the community extends beyond his work as an architect. He's the chair of the Dallas Black Chamber of Commerce and serves on the board for the Dallas Citizens Council, Lone Star Investment Advisors, and the Dallas Regional Chamber. Welcome, gentlemen. And Norm, I guess the mic is yours.
I'll take it. Thank you very much, Zaida.
Welcome.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our presentation tonight. We're always happy to be able to talk about an exciting project like Fair Park. We get to quite a bit, this group does. So we're going to talk about the master plan update that y'all been hearing about for a while. You know, Dallas sort of has the reputation of doing a lot of planning and preparing plans and then putting them on the shelf. That is very much not the case this time. In fact, what we're doing is a continuation of a process that started about 18 years ago. The very first master plan, the Fair Park Comprehensive Development Plan, which you see on the screen there now. Do we see it now?
You should now.
Okay, 1 second. Sorry, there it is. I was having a little screen trouble. That was prepared by Hargraves and Associates and their team in 2003. Next slide. That master plan was updated 4 years later in 2007, specific to some of the things that had happened right after its issuance. The problem with 2007, however, is that the next year was 2008. And so the next year we encountered the Great Recession, and we entered a time of austerity for several years, actually. By the early 2010s, the effect that austerity had on much of Dallas, particularly Fair Park, was showing itself as a problem. Things had not moved forward as planned. And Fair Park, it seemed, was getting into the headlines and into the papers for all the wrong reasons, and a lot more often than people really wanted it to. So Mayor Rollins appointed a blue ribbon task force, the Fair Park Task Force. Next slide, please. Where they took basically, I would call it a reset. They sat back and said, and looked at what was going on and what needed to be done. That is not technically an extension or an update to this master plan, but you'll see tonight that it really does drive a lot of what we will be talking about this evening. In the task force recommendations, there were three primary ones, and they're listed here. The first one, empowering a new organization as operational and marketing authority. You can check that box. That one has been done. That is Fair Park First and our partners, Spectra and Biederman Redevelopment Ventures. We've been on the job about 2 years now, and we're tasked with following up with the other components of those recommendations. The second one is establish a community park on the south side of Fair Park. Most of what you see tonight will be centered on that directive. That has been our primary focus, our primary charge since we took over. And there's been the reason behind updating the master plan at this time is that we needed to accommodate a park that didn't really appear in the master plan previously. So you'll see this is a little heavy. This master plan update is sort of park centric for that reason. And the final thing they recommended was enhanced access and connectivity with the community and the city. And while that may sound like gates and trails and things, it really permeates, that idea permeates everything that we do through Fair Park First. From the composition of our board to the programs that we operate to our to the vendors that we use, connection with the community as a whole, and with the neighboring residents in particular, really goes through everything that we do. So there's also a preservation component here, which I'm going to speak to later. You won't see a lot of it in the graphics that Brian's about to show you because the things that we've come through with that are really not that graphically oriented, but we'll talk about them at the end. So at this point, Brian, if you would please, sir, I'll leave it to you to go through the slides.
Thank you very much, everyone. It's great to be with you here tonight. I always love an opportunity to connect with Preservation Dallas and AIA. I see some friends as I look down all of the participants, and I really appreciate you guys making some time to talk about Fair Park. I've been lucky to work in my career on several transformative projects that have really found new reasons for people to love old things. I've always been very passionate about our historic architecture and places that unify our culture. This effort, I believe, is a very comprehensive way of addressing a plan forward into the future based on the 4 pillars of Fair Park First. I always like to start with explaining who we are and how we approach things. Everything we do as a nonprofit, classic, public-private partnership-based organization is filtered through these 4 very simple principles. First and foremost, history. This is a National Historic Landmark of the highest caliber. It is best comparable to other sites like the Alamo. But for whatever reason, when we talk about Fair Park, it seems to be in a different context. We believe that there's a way to continue to celebrate everything wonderful in Texan. That's what we were built for. Continue to host the marquee, large national and international events that we're known for, while at the same time serving the community. We really are a community-first organization. We want to see those connectivity points that Norm was talking about on all levels of our interaction. And you saw some of that today with the announcement that we will be hosting Dallas's first mega vaccination site. That's an ongoing conversation. And much like the recent food distributions that we did with the North Texas Food Bank, this is bigger than simply activating the park. But that said, that is our number 1 tool. You see that highlighted here as a main pillar. And that is the basis of our partnership with Spectra. For those that don't know, they are an international world-class organization charged with venue management all over the world. Racetracks, stadiums, things of that nature. They helped us secure the first stadium concerts in over 20 years in the Cotton Bowl with the Rolling Stones and BTS. And despite the impacts of COVID, I am pleased to announce that there will be some further announcements later in the year. We know kind of when we're holding dates. We can't share it with you just yet. But assuming everybody's still in good health, we hope to see Mick Jagger on the Cotton Bowl stage sooner than later. Then beyond that, culture, right? Culture is unified through all of our resident institutions, also in that unique Texan character, and also in the communities that surround us. Biederman Redevelopment Ventures is a core part of our team, and they unify day-to-day activation in the same way that Spectra handles day-to-day management of the site, as well as the activation of large-scale events, to ensure that there's always something going on that celebrates some part of that authentic character for Fair Park, the community, for the city, and for the state as a whole. That's really what we were built for. Beyond that, I want to highlight there's no major changes. This is really a reactivation and revitalization plan with a preservation philosophy. As we move forward in this, inherent to who we are and what we are, we were built to celebrate all things Texan in the realm of large-scale events that will always be a core part of what we do. The State Fair of Texas will remain here. It is one of the largest ticketed annual events in America. We are proud to host it. We will also expand additional sporting events. Some of you may have attended the NHL Winter Classic. That was a tremendously successful event seen worldwide, and is also, for the record, the 2nd largest professional hockey game in the history of the sport. The biggest one was in Michigan at a significantly larger stadium, so I feel like that's cheating. I'd like to think our record stands alone here in the Lone Star State. We are actively working to draw in additional educational, cultural institutions, nonprofits, community use activities, and increased hospitality resources into the park. And this is really what we see Fair Park as. It's all of those traditional units together, operating in a holistic fashion that really represents these guiding principles. Very simply, this effort was about creating one site managed in that holistic fashion year-round. There is certainly a misnomer that all we do is the State Fair and then we kind of shut down for the rest of the year. The year we came in, there were over 1,500 events in Fair Park. We hope to act as a spotlight and a microphone, if you will, to help tell that good story. But we are going to draw in additional programming that helps us realize our potential as a year-round destination. We are going to continue to be inspired and influenced by the 1936 Texas Centennial Exposition. Norm's going to talk about that at some length later with our new favorite acronym. And we do this in a manner that protects not only the value of what you see in the site, but also around us. These neighborhoods are rich. They have always lived in the shadow of the park. And unfortunately, we've not always been a good neighbor. So we hope that all of this, in the context of putting the park back in Fair Park, is very welcoming to all people, all income levels, and all backgrounds. Ultimately, when I talk about all backgrounds, my experience as a non-native Dallasite, please don't throw anything at your screen, is that when I started to try to wrap my head around Fair Park, I heard 1,000 different versions of who we are and what we might hope to be. This process was about taking the best urban planning principles and a very comprehensive public engagement strategy, taking all of those different perspectives for whom people might recognize Fair Park solely as a corny dog thing. They might remember their first job ever as a ticket taker, as does one of our board members for the music hall. They might think of this entirely in the context of the African American Museum or TDG, or for them it might be some of the deep racial scars in the past based on some abuses. These urban planning principles, in partnership with our designers, with our architects, has come together with a plan that is immediately pragmatic and immediately implementable. When we talk about how we took in community engagement, it was a micro and macro process. At the local level, we engaged in over 600 events throughout the beginning of this process to the end. But we believe one of the primary areas of success was 24 events that we did in the surrounding area that began to create really meaningful connections with people away from the park. We started off with very rote, formal events in the park, and we found that there was a fatigue to Fair Park. So we pivoted, moved into people's schools, places of worship, their community centers, places where they were comfortable, could engage in real, straight talk. And this began to shift the narrative. And people that have long since been fatigued with other plans that didn't go anywhere got re-engaged. And we began to move forward with a little bit of a different vision. What that represents is a view all the way around the park. We thought that was tremendously important. Fair Park should not and will never have a front door and a back door. We're surrounded by the community. We belong to the community, and it's important we do that. We also took a comprehensive look at the Metroplex, looking at all of the foundations that might feed into our philanthropic needs as we improve the park. We talked to all of the major projects that are going on for infrastructure, whether that be the Mill Creek drainage relief effort, the potential changes that are happening to I-345 and I-45. We talked to all of the resident institutions and a variety of other organizations. GDPC has already been mentioned, TREC. We really tried to take a look at what Fair Park can be, not only to the people that live immediately around us, but as thoughtfully, what can we be to the Metroplex and what else feeds into this effort? And when you take those through the urban planning principles and design process, you start coming up with some big ideas. The first one is that people experience Fair Park in a very particular way, and we need to connect the individual siloed activities in the park in a way that creates that holistic campus. The way we do that is by analyzing the way that people come into the park and the way that they move from experience to experience. Based on a long study, we recognized there was a tremendous opportunity to expand a section of the Santa Fe Trail along our northern border along Washington. You see that represented here by this orange line that swings down Lego. That's so important because Lego was identified in those conversations in the surrounding area as being the primary thoroughfare when you could get to the park during our busiest events, whether the State Fair of Texas, whether activities when Hamilton is over at the music hall, or whether it's big activities that might be going on like EarthX. Many of the roads become congested, but Lego's viable. By extending that, we can have permeability that reconnects us to all of the Mill City, Queen City neighborhoods, to Jubilee Park to our north. And there's equally an opportunity to connect all of the existing year-round resident institutions and those buildings that were identified for ready revitalization, renewal, and new tenants with a 1.5-mile interior biking and walking trail that begins to create a pedestrian core. Right now, we're using State Fair net revenue dollars to establish a system of bollards that control traffic to better preserve an experience that's much more park-like. If you drove in Fair Park today, I like to joke it feels a little like Mad Max. If you've got a big car, you can probably go as fast as you want, anywhere you want, as long as you have the will to do so. That is not welcoming for pedestrians, and ultimately we have to do a better job of that. Likewise, we have to do a better job of discouraging automotive use. There has to be better connectivity with transit. In our conversations in the surrounding area, we spent time with the workers at Bonton Farm, a mere 8-minute drive away. And in that conversation, I learned that it takes over an hour and a half to get there on DART if you want to come from Bonton Farm to Fair Park. That is simply not viable. We have to do a better job. So we're actively working with DART to establish better routes through here. And in addition to that, find ways of connecting down Fitsy Avenue with better improved crossings, with additional stops along Robert B. Cullum, ways that people can be more meaningfully connected to alternate means of transportation. We've also spent a lot of time paying attention to the Expo Park DART station and also the DART station that is located off MLK, because we believe that's going to be absolutely essential in managing activity forward. We, of course, have a lot of parking. No secret there. We're a lot like a mall. We're built for the day after Thanksgiving, only in our case, it's the Texas OU game. But as we look to the future, we are going to be eliminating a lot of that surface parking in order to create more green space and connect all of the different buildings and experiences that I spoke about a moment ago. We are going to have to build some decks here, but we are not replacing 100% of those parking spaces. What we have to think about is that there won't be one thing happening in Fair Park. There will be 7 or 8 large-scale activations and tenants operating at any given time, and so you have to have parking in proximity. To that end, a parking assessment dictated one area that you see here near Gainsford Street off of Fitsy Avenue and an additional parking deck off of Al Lipscomb, Robert B. Cullum, and Perry Avenue here in the left-hand corner of the screen. As we move forward with those, there's an opportunity to do some really neat things for the property that I'll talk about in a second. Another thing that we had to consider relative to preservation and the experience in the park is we were built for a 5-year flood event. Dallas had 20-something of those last year. As we get hotter, as climate change becomes a greater impact for the area, this will be an ever-increasing problem. Ultimately, we have to add 24 acres of better stormwater management to the site. And no, don't stress, that does not mean we're going to build a lake in front of the Cotton Bowl Stadium. We have some novel ways of getting around that. We've taken an idea forward from the original 2003 Comprehensive Development Plan developed by Hargraves, that if there are new buildings built into particularly the historic core, they will be based on original footprints and designs for buildings from the 1936 exhibition. Again, it's that preservationist philosophy with a reactivation plan. I will say, just in all candor, our interest is not building new buildings unless there is a compelling need that cannot be met by an existing structure. We all know that there's a lot of buildings that are simply underoccupied and underutilized. In the short term, we believe that we will be building at least 3 structures that I want to highlight for you. One, through our comprehensive community engagement plan, we identified a location for the community park off Fitsy Avenue. We'll talk about why in a moment, but it's going to need some basic facilities. It's also going to have amenities that will need to be structural. So we'll talk about how we get there. I already identified one parking structure off Gainsford and Fitzhugh. And then over here, as we began to talk about how we would handle parking for the African American Museum, for the music hall, for that core of the most visited areas, it became clear to us that a better use of that would be some sort of mixed-use massing. There's been a lot of conversations about a potential on-site boutique hotel that would evoke the Art Deco stylings and create revenue streams based on the occupancy tax that come back into the property and allow us to fund improvements to address some of the deferred maintenance needs across the site. Know that when we say mixed use, this is not a live, work, play. You'll remember those land uses. We don't have the ability, nor would we want the ability to do long-term residential housing or condos or anything like that in the footprint. Speaking of the footprint, you will also notice this is an inwardly focused program. Ultimately, we are contractually obligated to manage the site itself, Fair Park, to the property line, 277 acres, and not 1 inch beyond. We spent a great deal of time talking about the fence lines and the fact that we recognize for many people they are an impediment that make us feel imposing and unwelcoming. The reality is that is only one of many impediments. And as we went through this process, thinking about the racial, the cultural, the economic boundaries, and the boundaries of 5-lane high-speed roads that surround the park on almost all sides, we began to recognize that there are inherent improvements that need to be made all the way around the fence line. Fence lines need to be walked in blocks in a variety of areas, but we do have a need due to perceptions of safety as well as our activation strategy for those large-scale events that we were built for and that are a part of our character as a National Historic Landmark. We recognize that we do need a fence line somewhere, and we will be walking that. We'll talk a little bit about what that looks like. The other thing that we took away from this planning process is that really, while we do have an obligation contractually to deliver the community park that we've identified off Fitsy, it is not enough. To connect this site and to create a holistic park that thrives, there have to be moments of respite. There have to be public areas that unify the existing buildings, the existing year-round tenants, and those buildings which are being reactivated with new tenants, with a network of green space that you see represented here. In all, when you put these ideas together, it's 52 improved and brand new acres of green space, knitting together all of the existing experiences on the site, and again, those buildings which are most readily available to be reused and activated on a 365-day a year, 360-degree basis. When I say 360 degrees, it's important to note that this plan seeks to really activate the entire park. There are nodes of activity that will be addressed in a manner that really drives resilience. The economic resilience of the park itself, the environmental resilience of the park itself through the elimination of over 800,000 square feet of impermeable surface that contributes to our flooding issues and our heat island. I will share with you that last year we did a survey in front of the African American Museum and measured a 45-degree heat island impact. That means on a day when it is 105 degrees, and we certainly have more than our fair share of those in Dallas, Texas, it feels like it's 150 degrees when you're standing in front of the African American Museum. Remember, I mentioned that is one of the most visited sites in the park. That's not hot enough to fry an egg. It's hot enough to cook a steak. And the bottom line is it has to be better. We have to do a better job of preserving an experience that is enjoyable. In addition to that, increased biodiversity. I mentioned climate change. We are currently about 96% live oak. And while that is an inherent part of our character, unfortunately, problems like oak wilt endanger those species. And over time, we need to add more trees and we need to increase the biodiversity in a way that addresses that. And we believe we've identified an opportunity to create over 1,000 additional trees, or rather plant 1,000 additional trees on site. So then when we flash forward 20 years into the future through 4 phases of improvement, we see a fair park very different from today. If you are to pull us up right now on Google Earth, you'll see a site that is largely gray. There's a lot of concrete. There's very little connection. Intuitive avenues and paths of travel are obscured by fence lines. You can't navigate your way around the site in an intuitive manner. There's no wayfinding. And ultimately that results in experiences that are disconnected, that do not function well. To address the problem of creating synergy between all of these existing areas, what we've done is we've really established 5 nodes of activity, each one with anchor tenants, as we think of them, that drive daily activation, daily use, and create a critical mass of humanity that has been a core part of Biederman Redevelopment Ventures' success in sites like Clybourne Park or Bryant Park in New York. There have to be a certain number of people visiting this site every single day, all year long, in order for it to thrive. As we flash into the museum area, we'll highlight an idea that we brought forward from 2003, and that was the idea that we would unify the African American Museum and the Music Hall with a new park space. This was there. It has not been carried this far into design. You'll also see a representation for what that mixed-use development can look like. And you can imagine very easily here at the base of that mixed-use massing, an opportunity for some ground-level cafes, so that when you come to see Hamilton, you have an opportunity to arrive early, take in some of the amazing international touring exhibitions that are hosted at the African American Museum, and to also have a cocktail before or a coffee after the performance, and enjoy Fair Park at length, creating an area of respite. This also stores water in a more environmentally friendly way, capturing rain that is currently running off and creating problems for the surrounding areas. The other thing it does is create opportunities for us to better activate the site. We are not building green spaces simply for the sake of that. Through the influence of Spectra and BRV, the idea is that these spaces will be activated with regular programming, some large scale, some small scale, that creates that critical mass of humanity, as well as creating new opportunities for revenue, not only for the park, but also for our resident institutions like the Music Hall and the African American Museum, who actively want to grow outside. Here you see a massing somewhere in the neighborhood of several hundred people. They're there for a festival. This is probably something the African American Museum put on that allows them to enjoy more of Fair Park. And obviously we'll of course have an appropriate parking plan for ADA accessibility, all of those things. Here we move further down the museum corridor to the Leonhardt Lagoon, where we're going to be creating better connections to the Cotton Bowl I'll talk about in a second. We see the band shell activated within a few years with some minor capital improvements as a part of phase 2, with regular small-scale outdoor performances. We are already working with the city's Office of Cultural Affairs. It's now the city's Office of Arts and Culture, in order to bring in some of their organizations. I see we got Lynn Rushton on here. I want to make sure I get that right. We'll be doing that as soon as this spring. So we see these resources being activated on a very regular basis. We also have the former home of the Perot, Science Place 1 and the Museum of Nature and Science. We are actively negotiating new leases for these buildings as we speak. This is an ongoing process. We put out an RFI on August 14th of last year, and it was very successful. Dozens of respondents. We went through a very long process of evaluation. And at this point, we have viable tenants that will be coming in with their own investments to portions of Science Place 1 and the Museum of Nature and Science, as well as some other buildings we'll talk about later. And that increases the impact of what we're doing. To better connect this to the outside area, we're also making an investment in the Mlk Gateway Park. This is a phase 1 project to better connect us to the avenue where I mentioned there's another DART station. We get a lot of use out of the park stop that's just outside of the former Women's Museum at Expo Park. We need a better connection here. We also need to establish a sense of identity and a sense of arrival. And we believe that's better done here by walking the fence line in a full block. And instead of having those black foreboding fences and an experience where it feels like we might ask for your passport, you're coming through Checkpoint Charlie, you see people from the surrounding area using the park on a daily basis. We are a city park. This is the experience you should see coming into Fair Park. And importantly, by adjusting those fence lines, this is outside the paywall, which means that this is an area that is going to be active and available even during our biggest excavations like the State Fair of Texas, like EarthX, like Dallas Pride, etc. As we move into the festival area, I mentioned the NHL Winter Classic. That was very successful. However, we activated a portion of the Midway with the State Fair of Texas, and we found that this area was congested. We see a natural ability to connect Leonhardt Lagoon to the Cotton Bowl in a more attractive way. We envision some sort of new paving system. Maybe it's GeoGrid. There needs to be an ability to capture some stormwater here. And we also need to beautify the area, creating some natural green connections, maybe perhaps a water feature that you see here. There need to be ways that we can still host large-scale activities, but create festivals here on a regular basis. Through Spectra's work, I'll play the I Know a Secret game and say there are additional festival shows beyond those that have been announced to the public that we continue to work on for the Cotton Bowl. But we also see small-scale activities out here. We were working on a plan to bring in farmers markets as well as evening markets and markets that highlight art and commerce through minority communities in a very authentic way. And we think that's really important. This seems like a natural area. And when we bring in a stadium show, we bring in those festivals, it makes a lot of sense to activate a portion of the Midway as we did for the Winter Classic. And to that end, the State Fair of Texas has actually agreed to shrink their storage area and their fence line in such a way as to reconnect MLK, create new plazas and new green spaces around it to make that a better area. Currently, it's kind of a dead end. You can't really get through there. And that's going to be very, very important as it feeds into a more pedestrian experience down Pennsylvania Avenue that connects TDG to the community park that'll be located just a bit further down, as well as the Dos Equis Amphitheater. When we focus on the Esplanade, this is an area where we see probably the least change, but a lot of improvements to the buildings themselves. Ultimately, there are some opportunities to better connect ourselves to that hiking and biking path. You'll see a gateway park located here next to Food and Fiber. You'll also see an enhancement of greenery around the Texas Vietnam Veterans Memorial and some increased planning based on some of the original 1936 landscape plans. We move to the agrarian area. This is a very significant location. This is some of the most architecturally significant and beautiful Art Deco art in the entire park. And yet it's really only been activated by the State Fair of Texas. Ultimately, we need a marquee tenant to drive this. And to that end, we have been negotiating with a party to move into a new use for the Coliseum that focuses on year-round equestrian activities, Western sports, and also a new entertainment concept that would adjoin to the Coliseum in such a way as to really celebrate that Texan spirit Right now, when you have visitors from out of town and they want to see cowboys, they want to experience Texas, we all get in the car and we drive 45 minutes and take them to Fort Worth. There's no reason Dallas shouldn't have its own facet there. And we believe there's an incredibly authentic way to do it in this location that ultimately feeds into exactly what the State Fair of Texas is ultimately all about. We think this is really going to be a big win for everybody. I'm going to wrap up here in just a second. I'm going to very quickly talk about the community park. There's a lot of info here. The one thing I'd have you take away is that 82% of the people that we surveyed in the surrounding areas supported a community park location off Fitsy Avenue. For all those proximity reasons that I talked about with Lego, it is certainly not lost on us that those were also areas that were taken from the surrounding communities through eminent domain. But ultimately, it was really the planning process that drove that, and also the ability to include all of the programming that was asked for throughout the planning process. Originally in the 2003-4 plan, there was an idea to put this along Robert B. Cullum, and you simply couldn't fit all of the program that was asked for in those spaces. You needed more acreage, and so that fell out fairly quickly. Folks, this slideshow is available online. There are a lot of design principles that were followed. We followed an academic matrix throughout this, and what we found is our architects ultimately supported those findings. And if anybody wants to dig into this deeper, these resources, as well as the full master plan document, are available at fairparkfirst.org. We'll mention that again at the end. You're welcome to go back and take a look here. We're happy to talk about it. It is interesting to me that there has been a park talked about for Fair Park, a community aspect, for as much as 40 years. But up until this process, nobody could identify where it would go, how big it would be, what the massing would look like. And though this is only a concept, I think it's very exciting to look at this and see the future of the park. You see a large civic lawn, you see a large community pavilion. This crowd represents well over 1,000 people. And if you zoom in very carefully, you'll see there's a small band. There was a desire to have a performance space, because though there are many performance spaces inside the park, due to economic barriers, those aren't always feasible. The idea that there needs to be ready programming that is available to all members and all income levels in the surrounding area is very important. When developing this, we paid a lot of attention to Millennium Park and Balboa, places where there are comparable sites that have amphitheaters and performance venues in proximity to open public areas, and the stormwater and naturalized plantings to hold some water, create an area of respite, to decrease some of the ambient temperature, does afford some opportunities to address its proximity to the Dos Equis Amphitheater. Obviously, there'll be a lot of children's play, but we also think it's equally important, because of the unique history of Fair Park and some of the challenging injustice in our past, to have a remembrance garden that acknowledges the communities that lived here in a very real way, through landscape design, through public art, and through a curatorial narrative. I am going to shut up in just a second and pass this mic back over to Norm. I feel I've taken far too much of your time. What I want to emphasize is currently, we are already deep into phase one. All of the buildings in green represent the $50 million in bond funds that the City of Dallas was kind enough to seed this project with. We are taking on an additional number of projects that include the community park. We must create a parking deck in order to basically take care of our contractual obligations with Live Nation, who operates the Dos Equis Amphitheater and the State Fair of Texas, as well as the new activity in the Coliseum. We will also build the Mlk Gateway Park within the next 5 years. And then there's an additional, I believe it's $12 million that's been allocated to public art and also architectural improvements that were not originally part of the $50 million bond fund. This does not include over $65 million in private equity that has been secured for the 3 leasing opportunities that I mentioned a moment ago. Where we are is we are deep into our fundraising process. We're looking forward to making some interesting announcements in the coming months. I think those are going to turn a few heads. I will tell you we have secured multiple 7-figure pledges. We're really excited about where we are with this. We're having some very exciting conversations about a naming gift, and ultimately we feel very confident that in particular the contractual obligation to open the community park by 2024 is still very much in play, even with the impacts of COVID-19. As we move to the future, it is a much broader plan and ultimately has to be influenced by further work, further study. And I'm going to allow Norm to talk a lot about how we're going to go about that moving forward.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate your presentation, and this is what we're here for, so you can take all the time you need within a little bit of restriction. So anyway, the master plan that was done by Hargraves and their team, particularly in the preservation side, had a lot of local representation. They did a fantastic job of identifying the important historic resources and outlining ways to preserve them and preserve the integrity of the National Historic Landmark site. As we've gotten into this master plan, we felt there was a couple of things from the previous master plans that had not been developed as much as we needed in this time. And so we've got really two big ideas that have come out of this that that you'll see in the master plan itself. We're going to try to address. The first one is the idea of appreciation and recognition of the importance of the Fair Park National Historic Landmark Site. I'll give you an example. If you were to talk to someone about the Alamo, chances are they would talk to you about Bowie and Crockett and Travis and Santa Ana and the buildings in downtown San Antonio that remain from that important battle. What they wouldn't talk to you about is the street tacos you can get over on one end of the plaza, or the burgers and shakes you can get from the 50s theme diner across the plaza. If you say instead to someone, hey, let's talk about the Fair Park, you will encounter what we have shown on the graphics here, what I call my corny dog problem. Now, we love the state fair and we love some corny dog, that's for sure. The problem we seem to have, though, is that most people experience the Fair Park through the State Fair of Texas experience, and that tints the way they review the space and changes how they perceive it. I'll give you a funny story with that. We have just recently selected landscape architects to help us with the new community park Brian was just showing you. And I was looking at one of the response LA firm, and they had a cover letter that started talking about how they were really emotionally involved with Fair Park, that they had a lot of people who are from Texas, that lived in Texas, and knew a lot about Fair Park. And then she led into how they really wanted to talk about corny dogs. And I just, okay, thank you very much. That is one of the issues that we have to address. So when you get into the details of the master plan, I won't go into some of these techniques here. But one of the things we're doing, and I'm doing it right now, is that we understand that we have got to promote the understanding and the recognition of Fair Park as an outrageously important historic site covered with important historic art. Fair Park is our Alamo. It is connected to those events. It is the celebration of the opportunities, freedoms, and advances made in the 100 years that followed the sacrifices of those events in 1836. The 1936 date is not arbitrary. There's a reason for it. It is a nationally known and appreciated site for any number of reasons. Almost all the boxes that you would check for historic designation would be checked for Fair Park. People associated with it, development patterns, important events, architecture, art, all of those things are here. It's just funny to us how that's not well appreciated. And just as I am preaching you to hear now, we're going to implement a lot of things that help people understand that. I will also mention here that I could say all exactly the same things about the art. Over 200 legitimate installations of public art on Fair Park, we find that those are equally underappreciated by the folks who love Fair Park and go there regularly. But it's just, that story is just not getting out. The other thing that we determined that needs to be addressed is, while they did a great job in the Hargraves plan of documenting things for the historic resources, we felt like we really needed better direction on what does that mean for the future. How do we fold the importance, and how do we leverage what we get with this historic legacy, and how does it impact what happens, how we redevelop Fair Park in the future? Give me the next slide. So we started with the fact that in the master plan, you can see that we talk about how the historic character of the site needs to both inform and inspire the work that we do, the work that anybody does at Fair Park. It needs to not be something that you just handle. Okay, well, let's, we got to do this. Let's make sure we don't trip over, something from the Landmark Commission. No, it needs to be integral to the design process. It needs to be integral to your thinking of how you approach what you do out here. And so to narrow that down a little further, I've come up with this. I borrowed this thing. You've heard of, the WW thing. So we've got, you might want to think of it this way, is what would George Dahl do? Is the approach that we're promoting for folks who've come out and the things that we do in the park at Fair Park. Let's see. So I think, next slide, please. So I'll kind of wrap up the preservation part by just an overview briefly of some of the things going on. First of all, I used to get a lot of questions about, well, are you going to fix the buildings? How are we going to fix the buildings? You can see in phase 1 of our master plan, the buildings on the left all have specific renovations and restoration work that we anticipate to undertake in phase 1. There are a variety of pots of money that we're going to or will go to do these. Everything from, some of it represented by bond work, some of it's represented by tenant improvements, some of it represented by federal and state programs that we think can participate and help us do this. But we'll be making real improvements on those buildings, we think, in the next few years as we take our plan forward. And this is a master plan. This is a living document. I joke that some of it's already, we're just rolling it out, and some of it may already be out of date because we've got a lot of things going on right now that move to these goals that we have expressed. And the list on the right here show you some of the things that we are starting to do that are a direct result of what we have found through the master planning process. As I mentioned, the history tours of Fair Park are already underway. The preparation of additional guidelines, things to help the potential tenants understand what we are trying to achieve here, those are all underway and will be continue to be developed and distributed. And with that, I think that's, again, it's a big document, and as we mentioned, you can download it and get into the details. There's a lot of detail. We realize this is a really quick skim of it, but download it and you can see more detail about how historic preservation and art work into the future of Fair Park. And with that, I'm going to let Brian take it and finish up before we take questions and talk about some of the other things that we know are happening and those that we can talk about.
I swear to you this time I will be brief. I thank you all for your attention. I get so excited talking about Fair Park. And one of my favorite moments is when people ask me, why is this going to be different? There's been other times people have talked about this and it hasn't gone anywhere. And the sad reality is a lot of great plans don't go anywhere, but this one is already different because we are actually doing the work already. Recent announcements, we have brought in an incredible team of designers and architects to work on the new community park. We have already basically elicited the help of Studio MLA out of Los Angeles, as well as some incredible local talent here. Studio Outside, of course, incredible landscape architects. BC Workshops, located just outside Fair Park. You really couldn't have a better local team and we believe a better national and international team together here. In particular, Allison Williams, with all of the many awards she's won, we could not be more excited that she is working on this project. And we think, as in many other areas, this is all about teamwork. We truly believe in powerful partnerships. We ourselves are a partnership organization. There is nothing we can do without the support of the city of Dallas and its wonderful citizens. There is nothing we can do without our commercial partners at Spectra, without the influence of BRV with all of their incredible experience and success in activating blighted parks, just like Fair Park. And there's nothing quite like this, but there are a lot of corollaries. And when you bring this level of talent, you bring people together that have the experience and you build the right partnership, phenomenal, transformative things are possible. And it doesn't end there. It's not just about the projects we are doing. We look across the campus and we see other opportunities to begin to revitalize these buildings and increase our impact. I will tell you, we have kicked off a capital campaign. We highlighted $58 million. That's, again, for the community park and the parking deck that is necessary based on the existing contracts and uses. But here we have 3 underutilized, largely empty buildings that are already under lease negotiations. For those of you with any experience in real estate, we are primarily approaching these as triple net opportunities, meaning we expect them to take on the costs of operating the building, as well as bring in capital for the restoration. These buildings have tremendous value, and there are a lot of people that are really excited to be a part of this new campus. And the word campus is significant. I see in the questions, we already have somebody asking, one that I get a lot, and that is, well, what about the State Fair? Don't they shut this thing down for 3 months out of the year? You can't do anything else. I can't speak to what happened before, but thus far the fair has been excellent partners. This year you will see, we will have an event, assuming everything continues and COVID does not get in the way again, the week before the fair. That happened the last time we had the fair as well. They've actually been incredibly flexible and they're very supportive of this vision and the idea that there will be 3 new year-round, 365-day-a-year operations bringing their own capital into this to increase our impact is, to me, again, further proof. It already is different. With that, again, I want to reinforce that we'd like you to use the Q&A feature here, list your questions there. The chat one gets a little crowded with the 223 people that we have joining here. Darren's going to flip in and help answer these questions and also help us get through it because we think there may be a lot here. But at this point, I'm going to stop this screen share. Again, you can find these resources at fairparkfirst.org. And I encourage you, take down Norman's email address. He wants to make himself available as a resource to all of you. It is norman.alston@fairparkfirst.org. With that, we are happy to take any questions and appreciate your attention tonight.
I got it.
All right.
Thank you. All right. I think I saw a couple of questions go through the chat. Again, I'm Darren James. I'm president of Fair Park First. One of the questions was, is this still a city-owned property? The city of Dallas still owns Fair Park. We are the agent for the city of Dallas. It is a 20-year base lease with 2 5-year options at the city's discretion. So we'll be here. So that's why you see the master plan as a 20-year kind of exercise broken up into 4 phases. We are definitely looking at this as a living document, as Norm stated, and as Brian mentioned as well. We're well into modifications and updates. I see a question about landscape architects. Brian mentioned Studio MLA, but the master plan update was actually done by Perkins&Will Master Plan and Landscape Architecture group out of Minneapolis. There's a question about Dos Equis Amphitheater connecting to the Midway. That was actually explored and discussed as a living document. Those are things that may be revisited in the future, but as of right now, as a place and time, we are not moving forward with that.
That's physically difficult to do. The reason it hasn't appeared, we thought of it also. And go out there, there's a really big wall that has to be breached somehow to get that done. And there's some other issues.
There's a significant grade change as well. Brian mentioned the Science and IMAX building, Science Place 1. We're under current lease negotiations to have a tenant. And Brian, the one thing that Brian alluded to is that we're looking for individuals that have synergy with the existing campus, bring a uniqueness so that you have a reason to drive from Fort Worth or San Antonio to come to Fair Park. And so each of the offerings that we're in negotiations with right now are individuals that will be bringing something that's unique and different and new to the city, or they're going to be relocating from another place in the city. Ford Building and Centennial. Those are placeholders we are talking about. We don't see a need. We have over 250,000 square feet of underutilized facilities right now. There's not any real desire or need to bring on new buildings. And I'll let Norm kind of finish the answer to that one.
Yeah, no, the four, yeah, we show buildings. There are several of the missing original historic buildings that have been in the plan and continue to be in the plan for replication. We have enough information to replicate them very accurately, and if we can do that, then we want to do so. But that's only when we need the square footage. Ford Building and the Petroleum Building both are actually very important architecturally to the urban design of the park, but those won't be undertaken until there's a physical need and someone to really champion doing that. So I don't. It's not on the horizon, Kyle, but it's something we'd all love to see done.
How do we? This is a perfect segue to the next question. How do we balance the protection of historic assets with implementation of new ideas and strategy? Norm, as well as other board members, but also we're a national historic landmark. And so there's a national historic landmark boundary. We're not looking to replace the fabric of the existing campus that hits the 1936 footprint. So we're looking at things that kind of work holistically to make sure that we protect and preserve the historic nature of the campus and do not detract from that. Is there anything?
If I could add in there, the way our contract was organized with the city, they required a preservation expertise on our team and on our board. That's why I'm here. And we've got Valletta Lil also on our board providing that. And we push that issue constantly to make sure everybody's understanding that we have an important historic resource here. There are things you can and can't do, and we're happy to help them understand how we move forward with that.
Yeah, Norm does an excellent job of making sure.
It is never far from the front of mind. I can promise you that.
I'm ready.
The Women's Building is one of the underutilized facilities. We actually have some interest in some unique operators in that as well. We're looking for an organization that's sympathetic that's also going to take care of that facility going forward. There's a couple of questions about bicycles. We're going to be looking at amenities for bike racks and some other things, so we'll take care of that. Plans to offer high school and college students efforts to participate in preservation efforts for historic buildings that would encourage interest in Fair Park. So we actually have a internship program. We invest $100,000 per year in local students. Not this past year because of COVID. We actually partnered with DISD and had 10 students from Lincoln High School and 10 students from Madison High School working throughout the park. They don't all just work for Spectra. We actually had individuals in some of our resident institutions working. These are paid internships, and at the end of the summer, they get $1,000 to continue their education in some program after they graduate from high school. And so as the park evolves, those opportunities will evolve. And some of those will include historic preservation, as well as event management, facility management. So there's going to be a whole host of opportunities. Nobody is cutting grass or raking leaves. That is not, these are real professional internships, and they get college training, college essay writing, and sponsors and counseling with academic career counselors. Yes, the plans are, would the plans to enhance Fair Park and offer more events, provide more jobs, especially for the surrounding communities. Part of our management agreement asked us to hire local first. In our intent, that was one of the reasons we went to Lincoln and Madison High Schools. They're in the shadow of Fair Park. Their students have traditionally been left out of some of the internship programs, so we wanted to make sure that they participated. So as the park grows, we're looking to hire as many individuals from the surrounding communities as possible. We're obviously looking for expertise, but we want to make sure that we're investing in the community. Will there be plans for signage, brown bag lunches, or evening presentations to provide information on the historic and cultural history of Fair Park and the surrounding communities? Norm is working through a variety of different educational opportunities. He'll be working with 8X, AIA, and Preservation Dallas on different things. So I can't speak specifically to what those will look like just now, but I know it's in the works. Part of that is please join his Tram tour. Those are very comprehensive, very educational, and he loves doing them.
Most of the time.
Most of the time.
Most of the time.
What's happening with the Coliseum? The Coliseum actually has some bond renovation money that is updating their seating, concession area, as well as some of the entry portals, life safety, and some of the other back of house things. There's also an interested party that is looking at a long-term operational strategy, as Brian alluded to, that will be Texas specific, but will bring some of Texas culture to that area and activate the agrarian area.
I can add to that we also recently announced that Fair Park was selected to host a very large televised volleyball tournament coming up. And that's actually going to be the first use of the building since the renovation. That'll be moving forward in February, obviously all within the confines of the restrictions that are placed on live sporting events, etc. But it's exciting that it'll give more attention to Fair Park that's activated again outside of that State Fair of Texas window to a national and international audience that'll be tuning in both on TV and online.
The question about Fair Park is generally perceived as an island. Is the city working in parallel on a viable master redevelopment plan? Let me answer that in a couple of different ways. Brian mentioned that we very specifically looked boundaries in. One of the reasons we did that was because of the historical nature and the sensitivity of what happened in the past. But also we've been in communication with our local city council person, as well as with city management staff and director of economic development. And they have launched a parallel plan to look at a comprehensive redevelopment plan that's going to look at what happens outside the park. There is a very strong concern about gentrification, but gentrification in itself is not bad. It's the displacement and the fact that the fact that you can't afford it. So they're looking very hard at how do they manage legacy residents and protect legacy residents. There's going to be a lot of economic pressure. Deep Ellum is getting closer to Fair Park. Fair Park is getting closer to Deep Ellum. You have what's happening down on Forest Avenue from 175 to Lamar. So there's a lot of opportunity in economic development. So there's a need for a push. So you've got Trek, Cornerstone, you've got the city's economic development department, Councilman Balzadua, as well as city manager T.C. Brodnax, that are all comprehensively looking at how do we protect the legacy resident. So that's an ongoing discussion, and it's not being pushed to the back. With such a large park in a city where a car is the center of transportation, are there enough places and attractions planned to generate movement and activities throughout the day and year to invite visitors into a safe and secure environment? So Fair Park is actually very safe. It's actually safer than some other parts of the city that don't get the same notoriety. But we understand that there is a perception of safety. And I will let AIA Dallas answer this just as I get to the next point. So we're going to look at the park index. We're looking at, we've worked with the rideshare companies as well as DART to look at how do we bring people into and around the park so that we activate the park. The other thing, placement of the community park as well as operators that are going to be moving into some of the underutilized facilities are going to start to activate portions of the park that have normally been dormant.
Okay. I'll add that we are also investing in a comprehensive modern camera system. The park has never had one. We want to be able to be inviting and friendly, but at the same time, we recognize that there is a perception of safety. I will tell you, in the study of this over the course of the last year and a half, we have learned that on a per acre basis, we are safer than I won't say them specifically, but major mixed-use developments that attract a lot of visitation, major shopping malls, things like that. For some reason, though we do have a much lower rate of property crime or violent crime, there's a different context when people talk about Fair Park. I think it has a lot to do with some of the cultural divides when things are south of 30. We're often lumped in with South Dallas. South Dallas is one neighborhood of the 24 we met with. There's a variety of different neighborhoods, and I think, unfortunately, there's some very negative cultural influences that paint things in a certain way. We are committed to a change there. We see a lot of value here, and ultimately, we think over time that's going to be better recognized. We've already had very favorable discussion with a lot of the media outlets here that unfairly talk about, crime in close proximity to Fair Park, even though it happened 2 miles away, much closer to City Hall, as an example. Somehow the dialogue is different, but we recognize that a branding effort and also the increased activation will be necessary in order to really have the impact necessary.
Thanks, Brian. A couple other questions. Status of the aquarium. We're in ongoing conversations as an agent of the city. The aquarium is actually managed currently by the zoo, which is a separate third-party type of public-private partnership. We're helping facilitate conversations on the city's behalf. More to come on that one later. There's kind of a very long question. A lot of it revolves around, Norm is typing the answer to that, but a lot of that.
I'm working on it here. Yeah.
So just in a nutshell, the more activity and the more things that happen, food courts and food offerings will provide that mass of humanity that's going to make some of those things more viable. So that's why we're looking at multiple venues and multiple strategies, and not just looking at events only. We're looking at things that are going to activate the park on a 365-day basis, so that there's people coming to the park on a daily basis. And our intent is that you come to the park and you don't just come to the park to go to the Texas Discovery Gardens, that you also come and you go to the Texas Discovery Gardens, then you hit the aquarium, and then you go to the African American Museum, and then later that evening you attend some other event at Dos Equis. Let's see, is there...
While he's looking through those, I will also note that while we're inwardly focused, there's another question in the chat that I don't want to ignore that touches on the challenges of gentrification and displacement. I will say that Councilman Basil Dua has commissioned a team of local people involved in real estate, local community leaders, people that live in the surrounding areas, and has formed a task force that will ultimately create a master plan for the external areas that ties into ours, that's meant to dovetail, because we philosophically do not want to get engaged in external development. The sad reality is the last few times the park did that and grew, it was not to the advantage of the people that live around the park. In fact, it was very, very negative. So we stand out from that. We still sit at the table, however, as ex officios. We do not vote. We do not engage in certain kinds of speculative real estate maneuvers, any of that. What we will do is we will help lend our voice and our bully pulpit to other grassroots organizations and the city, because ultimately the city is going to have to pass legislation and policy that helps protect the historic populations. We help aid in that process, and it's been our commitment throughout to continue doing that.
The kind of on that same line about crime issues, what we've identified in that in our community engagement process was kind of a new look. Instead of having everybody come to Fair Park or go to the Martin Luther King Center, we actually went into 24 different distinct neighborhoods we identified through one of our partners in the City for Good. These neighborhoods that had their own identities, their own neighborhood organizations, their own community groups and leadership. And so we actually went and sat with them. Sometimes we sat in their living rooms, sometimes it's their dining rooms, sometimes it's their churches. But what we found is that we got buy-in and ownership. And not only did we have that, but DPD, Dallas Police Department, was part of those conversations. So there's a comprehensive look. Obviously, crime in Dallas is a significant topic, and there's nothing that we can solve, but I think it's all a community effort, and those conversations are ongoing. The state fair is part of the conversation. The question always comes up, and I know we've addressed it a couple of times, but I want to make sure that we nail that home. The state fair has been a good partner. There are ongoing resident institutions that actually operate during the state fair currently today. All of the new potential tenants understand the window of when there will be a lot of new spectators and visitors to the park. Some of those are excited and looking forward to that influx of humanity to their venues as well. Healthy food items. Yeah, the state fair has some fried turkey and fried Coke and all of that stuff, but we'll be looking for a variety of what we call comfort food as well as healthy options. We've had both those come up in various times. Let's see. Underground parking was once part of the plan. It just became a very cost prohibitive approach, as well as a safety perception approach. So very pragmatically, we're looking at what's the best way to address our parking needs. And we don't have to do a one-to-one replacement on the parking based on our parking consultants' input as part of Perkins&Will team.
I'll add to that. There's also some challenging water table issues. The Mill Creek drainage relief problem or project will not solve all of the flooding and water table issues throughout the site. We simply weren't built with consideration for that. We were, very much at the time, they thought this was a one-off deal. Then the Pan American exhibition happened on the following year. We became the permanent home for the state fair and evolved. While the site has been in a permanent state of becoming, we're now contemplating, the sort of infrastructure investments that have to happen. That water table issue is actually one of the reasons why subterranean parking is so incredibly challenging.
Yeah, as part of when you guys pull up the master plan, you'll see that we have a water infrastructure component to the master plan. It's pretty comprehensive. So you'll see not only the storm drainage, but also supply. So we look at comprehensively what is going to be needed for the next 20 years. I'm looking through, seeing if I missed any major questions. I thought I saw one and it popped up and then it disappeared on me. Addition of trees is wonderful. What other types of sustainability measures? We're going to be looking at how do we address the lighting. So what do we look at? We're increase the lighting across the park. And that's going to be sustainably looked at. The one thing we didn't touch on was if anybody's familiar with this community in this area, or actually if you've gone to the Texas OU game, you know that when you pull up your phone that you'll see 5 bars, but you might have trouble getting access to the outside world. We're going to actually put a Wi-Fi overlay inside the park that's going to address some of those concerns inside the park. It's going to be a non-proprietary carrier that's going to allow each of the major carriers to come in, but it's also going to solve some of the pressures on the community residents outside. And so we're looking at comprehensively, we're looking at how do we increase the efficiency of some of the mechanical systems? How do we look at reducing the utility costs? We've already taken responsibility of paying the bills, and we've actually done a utility audit as well as a meter audit, and we found some cost savings based on some of the things we're doing. So we hit the ground running in October of 2018, and we're still chugging along to look at each one of those dollars that we save operationally. We can go back and reinvest in the park. That's another point I'd like to make. Any dollars that are generated in Fair Park stay at Fair Park. I don't think I've missed anything. Is there anything, Norm or Brian, you see I missed?
I didn't. There's an interesting comment in the chat relative to some, radioactive waste that'll be transported along the train lines. There's a variety of things that happen in and around Fair Park. We try to stay abreast of that. There's the ongoing conversation for high-speed rail. There's that one. There is, of course, the issue of the changes to I-30 and I-345. We're a part of all of those conversations. We are blessed with at least having a large bully pulpit, and we advocate for Fair Park on all levels. While we are inwardly focused, we also are intrinsically concerned with anything that will impact the community. And as with what I mentioned earlier, the fact that we're going to be one of the mega vaccination sites here for Dallas, will be the first one. We'll be opening next week. More details to come. It's very, very important for us to be a good neighbor. And I mean that in a profound way. That is a fundamental perspective in every conversation we have.
Hey, Norm, there was a question, and I'm not sure if it was addressed yet. Are the exteriors and interiors of the original 1936 museum buildings protected as new tenants come in? The global answer is yes, but Norm's going to give you the real answer.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Protected as in City Dallas ordinance protection. The answer is yes, substantially. What I like to tell people is plans for those buildings have to get past us first before Landmark gets to it. And so yes, we're absolutely familiar with and dedicated to protecting the historic character of the park, both inside and outside of the buildings.
All right. I don't believe I see any additional questions.
So I've been trying to answer some of these for us. As we go, we have a lot, and I expected a lot, but we're well past our time. So as you noted before, norman.alston@fairparkfirst.org. If you'll send me an email and reach out to me, I will do all I can to answer any of your questions and take your comments. This is, again, the living document. We're not finished. We're making changes as even now. We would love to hear from you if you've got thoughts and concerns. This is a community resource. We want you. We want to hear your voices. So please feel free to reach out to me anytime. And with that, Mr. President, Mr. Executive Director, I think what we might do is let everybody go eat dinner. It's,
all right. That sounds reasonable to me. Thank you, everyone. It's such a joy to be able to talk Fair Park.
It is. It's always fun.
I also posted my email address earlier. Feel free to reach out anytime. If I respond to you, you'll also have my cell number. We like to be pretty available.
Okay. All right. Well, folks, if anybody didn't get a question answered directly, I apologize. If there got to be a lot of them there at the end. Again, you know how to reach me. Don't go away mad. Send me an email. Let me know what you need to know. We'll get it for you. Okay.
Thank you.
And look forward to working with everybody to better Fair Park.
Good night, everybody.
Night.
Bye.